First, this bulletin from the WOR newsroom. 6 members of one family have been found shot to death in their night clothes in their expensive home in Amityville, Long Island. The only available information at this moment, according to the Amityville Village Police, is that the victims have been identified as members of the DeFeo family. They were found by a 23-year-old son, Ronald DeFeo, who is believed to be the only surviving member of the family. 6 members of the family found shot to death in their home in Amityville, Long Island. We will have further details on the 11 o'clock news.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back to the Hawk and Load Case Files. I'm your host, Hawk and Load. If you're watching this video on release, it's spooky season and Halloween is upon us. If you're watching this video in, say, mid-April of 2025, then I hope your day's getting better, David. That's going to freak out some guy named David for sure. You may be wondering, Hawk, if this is a Halloween video, what is your costume? Well, non-existent viewer, I decided to dress up as a rock star from the 1980s who's desperately trying to fight the fact that his glory days are behind him. I've decided for All Hallows Eve to cover one of the most paranormally sensational cases in American history. Except I'm not really going to cover anything paranormal. We don't need ghosts and ghouls to be disturbed by the story of the DeFeo murders. On November 13th, 1974, Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. shot his entire family dead at their home at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York. In one of the most high-profile family annihilations in history, it went on to inspire tales of hauntings and possessions ranging from Satanic to Native American burial grounds.
Catch him. Tortured Indians on my land, on my basement. I read about how he slit his throat so that his presence would live forever. Do you believe this could be true?
We're going to take a look today at the act of Familicide itself and the media circus that surrounded Butch's arrest, trial, and incarceration. This, my friends, is the story of the real Amityville Horror. Familicide is a type of murder in which one kills multiple close family members quickly, most often children, spouses, siblings, or parents. In about 50% of the cases, the assailant will then do themselves in. It is often referred to as family annihilation. While there are plenty of famous cases of such a tragic and unimaginable event, it is pretty rare in the scope of homicides, but is in fact the most common form of mass murder. Motives for family annihilators range from spousal revenge to the desire to be free of the life they've found themselves in to no true motive at all, at least none that is ever given by the perpetrator themselves. As deplorable as taking an innocent human life is among the more empathetic of us, it is made all that much worse when the victims are their own loving and trusting families. The why is often never justified, especially when children are involved, and when a familicide does take place and the assailant survives, it tends to create quite a spectacle. Amityville is a village near the town of Babylon in Suffolk County, on the south shore of Long Island in New York. It has a population of roughly 10,000 people, so in relation to the general area, it's quite small. Chances are, if you live outside of Suffolk County, you've only ever heard of this town thanks to one Ronald DeFeo Jr., as well as the wild stories from George and Kathy Lutz. We'll get into them later. While I am posting this as a Halloween-themed video, the supernatural isn't really going to be discussed in depth. The DeFeo murders were some of the most publicized and talked about crimes of the 1970s, and while Hollywood has thoroughly shit all over it, I intend to relay it to you as it happened. Ronald DeFeo Sr. was a hot-tempered and strict father to his children and worked hard at a Brooklyn Buick dealership to provide for them. He had pursued and attained the American dream, touted by media and politicians, especially in the 1970s. 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, Long Island was Ronald Sr.'s greatest accomplishment. It was a large, spacious house with many rooms and even included a private boathouse situated on the Amityville River. Behind the veneer of a hard-working father, Ronald Sr. was a bit of a hothead, prone to episodes of rage and even violence. Fights between himself and his wife Louise would often be pretty intense. And bearing witness to this were his 5 children. The oldest, Ronald Jr., was especially at the receiving end of Sr.'s strict discipline and aggression. As a young boy, Ronald Jr. was a bit overweight and was frequently bullied at school by classmates. He would escape at the end of the school day to his home, only to be targeted by his father. Sr. kept Jr., who had come to be known as Butch, on a short leash and demanded he stick up for himself when he was being attacked, and then would attack him when he defended himself against his father. It was a paradoxical environment for sure, and it led to Butch growing into a rather large and violent teenager. Once he was big enough to do something about his father's rage, he did. Fights between father and son would often come to blows at even the smallest transgressions. His parents could see anger issues developing in their eldest child and attempted to get him help, but Butch denied it. They instead decided that spoiling him rotten, buying him anything and everything that he wanted, would be the solution to his increasingly worrying temper. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. At 17, Butch was expelled from school and began experimenting with opiates and psychedelics. His anger issues began to get more and more psychotic. On a hunting trip, Butch would suddenly and without provocation turn his rifle on a friend and member of the hunting party, seemingly just to watch the fear fill his eyes. His friend ran from Butch, and Jr. later had the gall to ask him why he left so soon. At 18, Butch was given a job at his grandfather's dealership, the very same one where Sr. had built his cozy life. Being in the family, very little was expected of him, and by his own account, the job was easy. He was paid whether he showed up or not, and used the money to fuel his vices. Episodes of violence with his father became more and more frequent, with it escalating all the way to Butch pointing a loaded shotgun at his father's face. He was provoked by a fight between his parents, and in defense of his mother yelled,
"Leave that woman alone. I'm going to kill you, you fat fuck. This is it."
Butch pulled the trigger, but the gun didn't fire. A stunned Ronald Sr. stood still and terrified as his son lowered the gun and left the room. In an article for True TV in December of 2008 by Douglas B. Lynott.
In the weeks before the slayings, relations between Butch DeFeo and his father had reached a breaking point. Butch, apparently dissatisfied with the money he earned from his father, had devised a scheme to further defraud his family. 2 weeks before the slayings, Butch was set on an errand by one of the staff at the Buick dealership, given the responsibility of depositing $1,800 cash and $20,000 in checks in the bank. Instead, Butch arranged to be robbed on his way to the bank by an acquaintance, with whom he later split the loot.
In the early hours of November 14, 1974, the DeFeo family slept comfortably in their home at 112 Ocean Avenue, all except Butch. The crescendo of hate and rage pacing through his mind had finally reached a pitch. He armed himself with a .35 caliber rifle and crept up to his parents' room. Butch fired 2 shots at his sleeping father. A startled Louise awoke but had nearly no time to react as Butch fired an additional 2 shots into his mother, killing her as well. Despite the loud shots, none of the DeFeo children seemed to be disturbed in their sleep. Butch then systematically went from room to room, ending the lives of each of his siblings. In less than 15 minutes, 6 members of the DeFeo family lay dead in their beds. Butch showered and cleaned himself, gathering his bloodied clothing into a pillowcase. He then ventured out to Brooklyn and disposed of them in a storm drain. He then returned to Long Island and headed to work as if nothing had happened. He left at noon and met up with his girlfriend, noting to her that he had called home several times but got no answer and that he was worried. They went shopping at the mall together before meeting up with a friend at Henry's, a local bar. Once at the bar, he again noted to his friends that he was worried about his family. He then ventured over to his house to make his discovery, only to return a short time later, frantically bursting through the bar's doors and screaming for help. He was putting on a performance of a lifetime. Butch and a small group of friends loaded into the car and made their way to 112 Ocean Avenue. Once they arrived, Bobby Kelsky, Butch's friend, raced into the house and straight to the master bedroom to find Ronald and Louise, face down and deceased in their beds. As the police arrived, Butch was in hysterics, crying out in emotional turmoil over the death of his family. Later on, when detectives arrived, they immediately questioned the family's lone survivor, Ronald DeFeo Jr. Butch DeFeo was a psychotic mess of a human being. As hard-working as his old man was, the DeFeos failed miserably at raising their eldest son. But even so, an execution-style slaying in the middle of the night was not the solution. But detectives were determined to get to the bottom of things, and Butch's days as a free man were numbered. In initial questioning, Butch pointed out the killings being mafia-related. This was New York City in the 1970s, after all. In that vein, police feared that Butch may still be a target and transported him to the police headquarters. There, Butch gave his written statement saying that he was home the night before and was up late watching a movie. Being unable to sleep, he decided to head to work early. He then described the remainder of his day, leading up to the discovery of his parents. He elaborated in interviews to the family's innocent ties to a member of the mafia and that they had previously had a dispute with him. Police saw Butch as a cooperative victim, but it wasn't going to remain that way for long. Boxes for firearms that Butch owned were collected at his home as evidence, and once the make and caliber of the murder weapon were determined, it matched one of Butch's rifles. Questioning of friend Bobby Kelsky led police to the fact that Butch was a gun nut and had staged a robbery just weeks before the murders. Police were now beginning to look at Jr. as a potential suspect. Butch was shaken awake, read his rights, and thrown into an interrogation room, to many protests. He made the mistake many guilty murderers make in their pursuit of getting away with it and waived his right to counsel, believing that he could talk his way out of it. In his written statement, Butch said that he was up till 4 a.m. and heard his brother in the bathroom at one point. Detective Dennis Rafferty pressured DeFeo, saying,
"Butch, the whole family was found in bed lying in their bedclothes. That indicates to me that it didn't happen at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon after you'd gone to work."
With this, Butch cracked slightly, admitting that he was present during the killings but didn't carry them out himself.
"Butch, it's incredible,"
said Rafferty.
"It's almost unbelievable, Butch. We know we have a .35 caliber gun box from your room. Every one of the victims has been shot with a .35 caliber. And you've seen the whole thing. There has to be more to it. It's your gun that was used."
After trying to convince detectives that he was led room to room by intruders who murdered his family,
"It all started so fast. Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, each of you will be changed to some degree by this case. You will leave this courtroom after rendering a verdict, perhaps a month from now, carrying with you an abiding memory of the horror that occurred in that house at 112 Ocean Avenue in the dead of night 11 months ago.
Butch DeFeo's trial commenced on October 14, 1975, nearly 1 year after the murders of his entire family. It was about as open and shut to prosecutors as it gets. Butch was a pathological liar and a cold-blooded killer, and they intended to send him to the gallows. Butch's defense attempted to plead innocence by reason of insanity, going as far as claiming to be God and that he was possessed by Satan. He was acting to the best of his ability, but the jury wasn't buying it. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was found guilty of the Familicide, 6 counts of second-degree murder, and sentenced to life in prison. Butch DeFeo died at age 69 on March 12, 2021, of an unknown illness, bringing a certain end to the Amityville Horror. Beyond George and Kathy Lutz, beyond Ed and Lorraine Warren, beyond Hollywood, the real horror that took place at 112 Ocean Avenue is plenty capable of sending a chill to your core. 6 members of the DeFeo family were murdered in their beds by their deranged son and brother. That, kids, is plenty horrifying to me without bringing the supernatural into it. My conclusion is simple. Butch DeFeo was a fucking monster. He spent most of his life in a cage where he belonged, and the world is a better place without him. Well, that, kids, was the story of the real Amityville Horror and Ronald DeFeo Jr. If you like the video, let me know your thoughts, and if there is a person, subject, or shit show you want me to cover, leave them down in the comments. This was the Hawk and Load Case Files. I've been your host, Hawk and Load, and until next time, take care of each other. At their home on 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, Fuck, I almost got it. I intend to relay it to you as it happened. That was a good one. That was good. I'm a fucking pro. All right? You recognize Hawk and Low at 1 million subs. We're on the way.